The painting behind me is called Man o' War and Other Ships Off the Dutch Coast. It's by a 17th century Dutch artist called Ludolf Backhausen, and it entered the collection a couple of years ago, but it wasn't really as easy as that. One day, my colleague, the curator of European paintings, George Keyes, came to my office with a transparency of a beautiful Dutch marine painting. He talked about its beautiful quality and about how it fitted into the collection and about how it was, above all, something that we actually had the funds for. So, enthused by George's attitude, we decided that we would bring the painting over to have a look at it. And when it arrived and was brought into my office, it was indeed as beautiful as George said. It had been recently cleaned, which revealed that the condition of the painting was about as good as it can get. When you look at a Dutch painting, a Dutch marine painting, one of the things you look for is to see if the rigging is still intact. Because when Backhausen painted this picture, he would have painted the whole thing, all of the ships, all of the background and the sky and the sails and the masts, and he would then have let the paint dry. When it was dry, he would have gone in with a very small brush and would have painted the rigging in. But paintings like this are 300 years old, and that means they've gone through a lot in their lifetime. Very often they've been cleaned several times, and a harsh kind of cleaning that was carried out in the 18th and early 20th century means that the surface would be scrubbed, and the beautiful delicate rigging put on when the rest of the paint was dry is the first thing to come off. So finding that rigging intact there meant that this was a work of art in nearly pristine condition. So, all seemed well and good. It was a beautiful painting in beautiful condition, and it fit very well into our collection. But then it turned out to be not quite so good, because as George did his research into this painting, we discovered that there was a rather difficult gap in the provenance. The painting had been in a British noble collection until the late 1920s, when it was sold and went to Amsterdam, to a Dutch dealer. But then, in the very early 30s, it disappeared completely. And we discovered that in fact it had come into the dealer's hand, a London dealer who we were working with, from an auction in Heidelberg in Germany, where it had been suddenly appeared onto the market, owned by a bank. This was the kind of thing that makes your hair stand on end, because it really said it's very likely that this is Nazi looted art. And at that point, by American law, we can't do anything with the painting but hold on to it until we found out about it. We can't ship it across state lines. I was in the wonderful position of calling the dealer in London and saying that we weren't going to buy the painting, but we couldn't send it back either. It was really a very interesting conversation. But the dealer understood the kind of position that we were in, and he began to help us work out what had happened to this painting and what we could do about it. Of course, we weren't the owner of the painting, so it wasn't really up to us to decide what to do. But we talked with the dealer, and the dealer decided to engage a company based in London called the Art Loss Registry, which is one of several archives that keep track of works of art that may have been lost or stolen. It very quickly turned out, within a matter of days or weeks, that this painting was very likely one that had come from a European collection. A collection that had been sold at a ridiculously low price to the Nazi authorities so that the owner and his family could buy the visas necessary to get them to safety in England, in Britain, or the United States of America. We looked at his collection. It was recorded. There was one painting that had never been returned to him. It was a marine painting. It was not the same artist as listed, but we really had no reason to doubt that this particular Backhausen was the same painting that was listed as being by a different artist in this individual's collection. So we really felt that we knew what the painting was, we knew where it had come from, and we very quickly tracked down the heirs of the painting. There were 5 of them. And we found them, they were identified, which is good. We found them, as I say, but there were 5 of them. You can't cut a painting into 5 pieces. Again, they quickly came to the idea that they would like the proceeds from the sale. If the museum could find a way to buy it, they would like the proceeds. Again, it all seems quite simple, and we were moving ahead very, very happily. There we were, sailing along quite nicely, you might say. But at that point, when we'd identified the owners, when we'd all agreed what we wanted to do, things began to slow down dramatically. Because by the European law of the country that it came from, and by the law of America, we had to make absolutely sure that this was the painting, that was looted, and even more important and more difficult, that the 5 heirs that were claiming this were the only heirs that existed. Because if we divided the money up and gave it to the 5 heirs and another one turned up, the museum would be liable for having disposed and sold of an object that actually belonged to something else. And to cut a long story short, it took close to 18 months before we satisfied the laws of the European country and before we satisfied ourselves and our own legal counsel that it was indeed safe to sell, safe to buy this picture. And it very, very quickly transpired. The dealer worked as an agent on behalf of the 5 family members, and we finally, 18 months after the work had first come into the museum, acquired the work formally, and it entered the DIA's collection. To the Dutch at the time, this would have been a picture that portrayed the power and prosperity of their country. You have this man of war heeling over as it goes into port, dwarfing the other ships that you see against a very low-lying landscape. In the left-hand corner, there's a couple, very meticulously painted. They're almost portraits. In fact, if it were a merchant ship behind, you might even think that it was the merchant and his wife. But as it's a man of war, it's possible that it's actually a portrait of the artist himself. Certainly, he signed his name on one of the pieces of flotsam that you see on the shore in the very foreground of the painting. And in the towards the left-hand corner, you see a man and his dog, the dog crouching down, cowering in the shadow of his master as they approach the other people. But like so much Dutch painting of the 17th century, it is also about the beauty, the strange beauty of the Dutch landscape, which is to say, the skyscape. And what you have here are these wonderful moving clouds, lit, this pink light from presumably a rising or a setting sun early in the morning or late in the afternoon. And what is most miraculous that you get in paintings by Backhausen and people of his quality is there is actually a palpable sense of that humidity, the wetness that you get, the cold wetness that you get in northern European air by the ocean.